Hi, my name is Rehana Aqeel, and I will be presenting my research paper on witnessing the traumatic events of the war in Gaza on social media and how this has affected the mental health of American Muslims. Now, the war in Gaza has taken hundreds of thousands of lives. Unprecedented horrors are currently being perpetrated against the Palestinian people. Witnessing this level of tragedy does take a toll on the viewer, often causing them vicarious trauma. So viewers who watch coverage of violent events are at an increased risk of developing symptoms of emotional distress. In analyzing this, I found that many Muslim Americans feel closely connected to this war as the victims are often members of their own religious community. For this reason, Muslim Americans are particularly troubled by the number of casualties of the war. As a result of their desire to stay informed on the events in Gaza, Muslim Americans are further exposing themselves to horrific crimes. People feel a need to be involved by reading the news and watching firsthand accounts. Viewers across the world are witnessing destruction like they've never seen. In order to stay up to date on information, they feel that this is their way of doing something for the cause. Social media is constantly pulling Muslim Americans back online, but what they fail to take into consideration is how this constant barrage of information will affect their mental health. So the effects. University students may feel that they cannot speak up or protest without fear of scrutiny and backlash. Given the circumstances of late, with several protesters and organizers, even writers, being detained by the federal government for their work with the solidarity movement, fear is growing exponentially. Furthermore, even employees of companies may be targeted for speaking out against the war, thereby forcing those people to choose between standing up for a cause they believe in or supporting their families. Thus, people who work and study at institutions which support the American government's funding of the war may feel powerless, leading to frustration and anxiety. So that led to my methodology. On a personal level, living in and loving the country where I grew up, while knowing that our government is aiding and supplying weapons to Israel while Gazans are dying daily from those same weapons, further causes mental anguish. In order to gain insight from my Muslim American cohorts, I conducted a survey of 25 of my peers. Respondents answered a variety of questions related to their feelings of witnessing the war. So I will go through those questions with you right now. My first question was which social media site people use most often. It was Instagram. I asked if people felt like they engaged more or less with social media. Most people engaged more now. How did people feel after witnessing this tragedy? Sad, angry, anxious? Most felt all. I asked if people felt that if their daily life was being interrupted. For most, it was. I asked if people were suffering from some kind of vicarious trauma, and most said yes. I asked if um, people were affected more because they were Muslim, and this was the largest yes response I got from my survey. And I asked if people thought that this war would have a lasting detrimental effect on their lives, and they said yes. I asked if people had been able to do anything to alleviate those feelings of vicarious trauma. Half said yes, and half said no. Either they hadn't been able to alleviate them, or they just didn't feel that way. My ninth question was what actions people took to alleviate those feelings. Some donated money, some wrote letters to officials, some raised awareness through social media or attending protests, and others used either boycott or prayer to affect change. Finally, I asked if people were able to make a lasting impact to alleviate their suffering of Palestinians, would that decrease their survivor's guilt? Some felt it wasn't applicable because they didn't feel that way, and some said no, even that wouldn't help. But a vast majority of people said that an impact would lessen these feelings for them. So, in conclusion, completing this assessment confirms the idea for me that vicarious trauma is a real and lasting phenomenon, which refers to the emotional and psychological distress that can result from prolonged exposure to traumatic events, even if they're not directly experienced. The next steps will involve um, finding a path forward. If one allows this overwhelming grief to take over their daily lives, then they're choosing to remain incapacitated by what they've seen. And this is a disservice to those who are truly suffering. Muslim Americans who are not directly impacted by this war firsthand have an obligation um, to amplify the voices of those who are suffering directly from the war, who are the Palestinian people. When actions are taken upon injustice, it is only then that real change can be enacted. As shown in the survey responses, in order to make meaningful impact, the community will have to find solace by remaining actively engaged with the situation, by remaining steadfast in their faith communities, involving themselves in activism and charitable giving. Muslim Americans can find meaning and support those who are directly affected by the war in Gaza.